Well, joining me tonight exclusively from Dharamshala is Tibet's new Prime Minister of the government-in-exile, Dr. Lobsang Sangay. I'm also joined by Dr. C. Rajamohan, Strategic Affairs Editor of the Indian Express. Dr. Sangay, congratulations, but may I ask you if this is truly a crown of thorns? Because you're a Prime Minister of a government-in-exile, a Prime Minister who's never actually seen his own country. What is the most challenging aspect of this new position for you?
There are a lot of challenges because it's an exile administration. The biggest challenge is to keep hope alive for Tibetan people inside Tibet, to send a message to them that we are a divided family, but their pain and suffering are felt by us every day, and then we will be for them and we will be there no matter what it takes till freedom is restored in Tibet. That is the most challenging task.
Dr. Sangay, you made the point earlier today about the international support, the acceptance of your position. You made the point that you are a democratically elected leader, unlike, as the Dalai Lama said, what's currently happening in Tibet. How realistic do you think that is? We know that China hasn't reacted so far, but they've already rejected your claim to this position. And from India as well, what are your expectations today?
Now, my expectation is that I'm democratically elected leader with a democratic mandate. India and any other country which enjoys democracy should know and should recognize and acknowledge and support the Tibetan freedom movement, because Tibet has one of the oldest civilization. Tibet is very, very important as far as environment is concerned. It has the 10 major rivers of Asia flows from Tibet.
Yes.
And we have been the guardian of the Tibetan plateau and its environment for millenniums. And we have shared with the rest of Asia, including India.
Yes.
So I think restoring the historical status or guardianship of Tibet's plateau to Tibetan people is in the interest of many Asian countries which enjoy water of Tibet.
Yes. And I think the strategic implications of what you're saying, Dr. Sangay, very important. If I may bring you there, Dr. Rajamohan, from an Indian point of view. Now, many in the establishment have often said that Tibet is the one issue on which we know that China is bound to react. And could this be our answer to China's constant provocations on the Arunachal question, the constant encirclement, as we talk about, of Chinese incursions into into Indian territory? Could that actually happen?
No, I don't think it's answer. Actually, Tibet has been the central question. As the Prime Minister said, it is the core issue. It's always been the core issue between India and China. When India negotiates the boundary disputes with China, we're actually talking about the Indo-Tibetan border.
Yes.
But Chinese claim Tibet is part of China. And when we discuss Arunachal, when the Chinese claim Arunachal, they're claiming it because they think it is part of Tibet. So, and then when Dalai Lama came here in 1959, since then, Tibet has been the core problem between India and China. The question is today, I think what we've seen today, a transition, the secularization of the Tibetan society, of the election of the leader, it's a defining moment. And I think both India and China will have difficult challenges to confront. How do you deal with now this movement, which is democratically elected, which is secular, and how do India and China deal with this new situation?
The issue of recognition, the point Dr. Sangay just made, that he said he appeals to all democratically elected governments to recognize it. For India, how easy is this going to be, knowing that China is going to be watching very closely for any Indian official reaction, that Dr. Sangay will not be treated the same way that the Dalai Lama has in terms of that recognition?
You see, right now, Indian government does not recognize the government in exile. What India has said is that...
Yet we give it refuge.
Yeah, they're here. I think they value it. The Tibetans value that. But I think recognition of the government in exile is a different thing.
Yes.
Because that would be a level of provocation with the Chinese. But I think what India would want is, as Dr. Sangay talked about, that there should be a genuine dialogue between him and the Chinese people. Because finally, issue has to be settled between the Tibetan people who are inside, who are outside, and the Chinese government. And I think India strongly supports the dialogue. And what we need is a dialogue between Dharamshala and Beijing.
Dr. Sangay, the dialogue in Dharamshala and Beijing, what role do you see Delhi actually playing in this? You made the point earlier about India's strategic interests, the fact of its encirclement by Chinese territories. We know road building, we know the issue in Nepal. what would you say would be in India's, so what would you ask India today in terms of strategic implications and perhaps in facilitating? What would you like India to do in a way for the Tibetan political cause?
No, India is already doing so much, so as a guest, you really hesitate to ask more than what India is doing. But based on Indian media, it's very clear that it is in India's interest to solve the issue of Tibet. Raja Mohanji has written about it, and other scholars have written about it. Till you solve the issue of Tibet, there are bound to be problems between India and China, because there was never India and China's border. It was India and Tibet's border, and all the problems that you have now is the same reputation of the Tibet issue. So that way, Tibet issue has to be addressed to find a buffer zone or a peaceful zone or a bridge between India and China. That's why it's very important.
Right, and of course, Dr. Sangay, as I said, a difficult task being a political successor to the Dalai Lama, who in so many ways is identified internationally with the Tibetan cause. How will you carve your own way in the transition, of course, from a quiet life as a Harvard law professor to Prime Minister in exile in Dharamshala?
Well, my role is not to replace His Holiness at all. That's an impossible task, but rather to fulfill his vision of a secular democratic society and live up to his expectation. He expects me to lead independently and have the Tibetan freedom movement stand on its own feet, so that, if necessary, we can be stronger and sustainable, and as long as it takes to restore freedom in Tibet. That is the main objective.
NDTV's cricket app, Android and iPhone, fastest scorecard, special analysis, and much more. Download free. ndtv.com/apps.